Happy Monday, everyone. I have the lovely Olivia Chadha on the podcast with me today. She is the author of Rise of the Red Hand, which comes out next week on the 2nd, I do believe, so February 2nd. And it is a great sci-fi, dystopian type novel that kind of hits close to home with what's going on. It's got a pandemic and, has a lot of themes about climate change, which is really interesting to read, but I really enjoyed it. I couldn't stop reading. And Olivia on the podcast with me today talks about her journey to, landing her agent, her journey through publishing, tells me about her favorite part of the publishing journey she's been on and her least favorite part as well. And as always, shares her favorite book right now with me. But before we get to Olivia, I want to tell you about my favorite book of the week, which also comes out next week. Comes out on February 5th and is called Whisper Island by Carissa Ann Lynch. I got an arc of it and loved it. It's very much a locked room type of mystery. This group of people go to an island, so a locked island type of mystery, and people start to disappear and be killed, and it was super exciting to read, and you're constantly guessing who's the killer and what's going on, and all these characters have something that they're hiding, something that they're keeping secret from the rest of the group. So I loved it. I really enjoyed it, and definitely recommend Whisper Island by Carissa Ann Lynch. And I'll go ahead and read you the blurb. 6 of us are going to the island. Only one of us will make it back. That one of us will be me. For friends Riley, Sam, Mia, and Scarlett, their trip to Whisper Island was meant to be a once-in-a-lifetime adventure. Just 4 young women with everything to live for. But as soon as they arrive, things start to go wrong. First, there is the unexpected arrival of Sammy's drug addict brother and his girlfriend Opal. Why are they here? And then the deaths begin. As the dream trip quickly turns into a nightmare, suspicion is high. Are they really alone on the island? Or is there a killer hiding in the shadows? And as each of the girls reveals a dark secret of their own, perhaps... So good. The truth is, the killer is closer than they think, just a whisper away. I think it was really well done, and it was a fun, quick read. I wanted to keep going. The chapters were really short too, which sometimes is really nice. Like, I feel like that sometimes helps me just get through books faster. I don't know if that's the same for other people, but yeah. So Whisper Island, definitely recommend reading it, and read Rise of the Red Hand by Olivia Chadha. It's so good. I loved it. And let's go ahead and get to know Olivia. So Olivia, can you tell me about your upcoming novel, Rise of the Red Hand?
Sure. So Rise of the Red Hand is the first book in a YA duology. It's a sci-fi set in the near future South Asia, and it centers on a relationship between 2 teens. One's a smuggler who's turned into a revolutionary, and her kind of the person. I gotta do this over. I'm so hard. This is like so hard. It's like one blurb, and I'm just like, no, I don't know what my book is about.
You're okay. Whenever you're ready, you get started.
Okay. So Rise of the Red Hand is the first book in a YA duology. It's a sci-fi set in a near future South Asia about a smuggler turned revolutionary and the disillusioned hacker son of a politician who try to take down their government that sacrifices their poorest to build its utopia.
Whoa, that sounds awesome. I mean, and like heavy for these kids to be doing that. But I think, in our world, I'm sure that there's some parallels and things people can see about themselves in those characters for sure.
Yeah, it's weird. When I wrote the book a few years ago, pre-pandemic, pre-everything,
Yeah.
I was thinking this is really far-fetched and really strange. And wow, I'm really reaching here into landscapes that aren't usually, in the YA landscape. And then here we are. So it's so weird when a book comes out and the context of the world that it enters, it changes the feeling of it. And it's something that I'm getting used to.
Wow, that's so exciting. I mean, to have your book coming out into the world, right? Can you tell me a little bit about your journey to this point through publishing?
Sure. This is, it's funny. And so much of my time before I had my agent and then got the publishing deal, I spent so much time thinking about these things, like, how do people do this? And when you hear these stories about, like, oh, they landed a book deal and blah, 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 and happily ever after, I really was like, wow, it seems like so many people it's such an easy, quick journey, right? But then you ask them, and they have written 14 books, and they're all in their drawer, and there is no easy path, So mine is just like everybody else's, except if you read how I got my agent, how I got the publishing deal, it seems super fast. But I was writing forever. I was that kid who was like collecting notebooks, and I wanted pencils instead of Legos. Like I was that kid.
Yeah.
And then, I studied literature, and I did a doctorate in literature and folklore and creative writing. And then I teach at college. And I've been writing for a long time. I published an adult literary novel, and I wrote a bunch of short stories. I also wrote comic books. That was my first gig.
That's cool.
And my first love, really. Yeah. And then I realized along the way that, like, in my formal education, like, I kept writing teen characters, and they were so much a part of my hope. Like, I got stuck there. I'm just there. That's what I love. And in those kind of formal spaces of, creative writing, blah, 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 it was like, you're not literary. And so I didn't realize until I graduated that that was what I wanted to do. So I had to start my education over again, even though I was overeducated, and annoyingly so. And so I joined my SCBWI and just dug in, and went to every conference I could, joined every group I could, read everything I could get my hands on, and gave myself my own kind of study in children's literature. Going back, I would have gone to, like, Vermont or tried to do something else instead of what I did, but here we are. And then by the time I wrote Rise, I kind of understood the landscape of publishing a lot better. And I wrote it, revised it, took it to a couple conferences, and then I was like, okay, I think it's ready. And I sent out a couple queries, like literally 2, because I really wanted to be careful, and I didn't want to just kind of send it out to 200 agents and see who bit. I really wanted to be careful, and I knew a couple of agents that I had my heart set on. And then I realized that DV Pitt was like literally the next week. And I said, okay, wait, I'm going to pitch then. And it's a cool kind of pitch day on Twitter for underrepresented creators. I think it's 2 days now, but when it was, for me, a couple of years ago, I think it was still 1 day. And so I made some pitches, set them up on TweetDeck, and Eric Smith liked my pitch, and I had a few likes, but he was one of the agent that I queried previously, and everyone knows him.
He's the best.
Such a lovely person, and so positive, and such a good author. And so I was like, oh my gosh, here we are. And then, it was kind of like a really fast, he sent me this gushing email. We had a call on a Saturday. From there, it was really fast. And I was pretty fortunate in that part. All the work that went in before, the decades of rejection, but then when you write the thing and it's the right time and all the stuff and the right person, it is really kind of like serendipity. And so it's kind of meant to be. And then after that, we went on sub pretty quickly, and Erewhon Books picked us up, and we got a 2-book deal. And that side of things went pretty quickly, like agent to publishing. It was super fast, and I know that's not normal, but I also think, like, I was in the trenches for a while, so maybe the muses and the gods were like, no, let's let her get something easy. Let's make it a little easier on the side. But yeah, that was my whole process. I think Twitter was a great place, for being a hellscape of so much agony and pain. It was also like this really fun place to kind of find agents, see what they're talking about. Manuscript wish list was so fun to kind of follow people through that hashtag. And then, and that's kind of how that let me in a little bit more into understanding what people wanted and what were they into and things like that.
I think that, I mean, I love Twitter, besides the hellscape part of it, because I have found such a great writing community, and some of my, I feel like, closest writing friends I met through there. But also for the querying process, yeah, it can be good to learn a little bit more about different agents and see, what they, books they might be reading and tweeting about. But those pitch events are so awesome. I love those. I mean, I think those have been a great way to get people's agents' eyes on different queries that maybe they wouldn't have normally, right? I think those are awesome.
I agree. I think we need more of them. Like, DV Pit is so good. And I like that it's so small. And, some of the other pitch contests are so big now that I feel like we need more small ones that are specific to a genre and to a certain audience and certain creators and stuff, so that those big ones are just like too big. Like, I feel like it's hard to crack into those, hard to like get an audience in those. So hopefully more people will make more, smaller ones for the different genres, so that everyone can kind of get their work in front of the right audience. I think it's amazing. It's been really, really helpful too. I totally agree.
Well, I mean, that's so exciting. I love Eric Smith. I feel like so lucky to have him as your agent. Looking back now on this whole process, what would your maybe like top tips be for authors who are querying right now?
Oh yeah, I mean, and it sounds so cliche, I think, but I really feel that so much of the pain and agony and suffering that I've experienced in the publishing process was because I was committed to a previous novel that wasn't ready. And, in my greatest, it was overwrought, it was too revised, and I was like, this is done. But, maybe it wasn't done. Yeah. Maybe it wasn't for publishing. Not everything we write is ready for publication, and not everything we write should be published. And I'm so thankful that the things that I previously wrote aren't books today. Like, I'm glad they're in the shadows. But I did learn so much by writing them, Okay, what did I do wrong? What do I need to do? What can I work on? And then something just kind of happened. So I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned was, just because I wrote a book doesn't mean it's ready to be published. Just because I revised it doesn't mean it should go out. But when it's right, and you are ready, and that thing is just humming, when you find the right people to query, it'll get picked up. It's not as hard. Like, if you're following the right thing, it opens up pretty quickly. And I feel like looking at manuscript wish list is such a gift, and I hope agents keep kind of updating their wishes, because that thing is amazing. You can find like editors and agents, what are they really looking for right now? And you can kind of query, and that's how you lead your query, is like, I see that you're into this really niche thing that I just happen to be doing. And that'll kind of pique their interest. But I think, so on one side, make sure your book is ready. And maybe, is this the book that you want to be in the world? And I know books take a long time to write, because that's the most frustrating thing, is like, you're in a hurry. Every writer is in a hurry because it takes so long to write a book. And we're like so proud of it. And you should be proud of everything you make, but it's like, maybe it's not the thing that's going to be the thing that opens you up into the world. And also it can be heartbreaking, because you can land an agent with that book, and then that agent, or, that book doesn't find a home. Yeah. And so you have to write another one, and that's okay, because there's this pressure of time. Like, every writer thinks they're going to get hit by a bus tomorrow, and all this work that they have done won't be seen. It's just the anxiety of the creator. But I think it's hard, and you could say this, but it doesn't make it easier, because I think I would have still done the same thing, written a book that was terrible and sent it out sent out a bunch of queries. But I also learned from that process too, like, how do you write a query? Oh yeah. How do you keep track of them? Yeah. So I just think, maybe know that if you don't find an agent, maybe there's another book and there's another agent, and maybe kind of think about things differently, but just don't stop writing. Don't stop writing new stuff is so important. Try new genres. Yeah. Because I never wrote sci-fi before. And I didn't realize it was a place that I really enjoy.
I think there's so much good, knowledge in what you said. I think that, there, I think too, like I was talking about this with someone the other day, like I feel like authors all kind of get on the same wavelength about a story. Like we see these patterns in publishing where like, we're all really into this and then we're all really into this and it all comes out around the same time. And so, that's a hard part about publishing too. Like maybe the book that you wrote and you think is really good, but the market is just too crowded with it, right? I think as you transfer yourself into the querying stage and wanting to be published, you got to realize like that it is still a business and that there's so many other things that go into, whether an agent thinks your book will sell and, if they'll sign you for that. And, I love what you said about just keep writing. Like we learn something from every manuscript we write. And yeah, I think we've all definitely queried something before it was ready. I know I have done that. And but as long as you keep writing and you keep working on something new, there's always going to be something else to query eventually. And, I feel like it takes a long time sometimes, but, we have the time. We're not, most of us not going to be mowed down by a bus tomorrow.
Yeah, I really hope not. And I feel like I totally agree. It's just a part of the process. We have to learn everything, and the business side is it continues to be quite interesting learning process as you go through the other side. It's like a door. Once you have an agent in a publishing deal, you walk through the door, but then there's other doors, and you realize, oh, there's a whole hallway with lots more doors that I didn't even know existed. Yes. So it's just one stage, and then there's a lot to learn past that in the business, which is really interesting to learn.
Yeah, there is always something new to learn, and the rejection doesn't end in the query phase. You see it throughout every part of your publishing journey. I think each stage prepares you for the next thing that you have got to deal with, and like life, right?
Absolutely, and I feel like writing is, it's a part of, it's an art, right? There's literature, there's literary, there are all these different genres. It's an art form, and it's one of the art forms that actually you can sell, which is rare. I think a lot of visual artists and songwriters and people who make other kinds of sculptors, painters, they make art, and they just are resigned in some kind of way to being like, I'm going to make this art, and it's for me, and maybe I'll make some money off of it, but it's not something I'm expecting at all. In fact, they usually have 3 jobs, and just know that the art is part of their existence. It's the thing that makes them happy. In writing, for some reason, we see these huge book deals, and so not only are we passionate about the art and making of the thing that we love and we're compelled to make, but we're like, oh, but should I be making money off this? Wow, that's interesting.
Right.
Like so-and-so got a Netflix deal, and so-and-so, what is happening? And so I think it's really important to not listen to all of that, because that's still just such a rare thing. And even though it sounds like, and it feels like, oh, so-and-so on Twitter got 4 books this past year, it's really a rare thing. And they probably didn't write them all, and they probably sold them all on a pitch, rather than they didn't really write them yet. I think there's just kind of an illusion of expediency.
Yes.
and money that doesn't exist. I think no matter what, we have to keep our eyes on our own paper as much as we can, and just remember to enjoy this writing so much, and try your hardest to write what makes you really happy, and something you're passionate about, other than, like you were mentioning, the market, writing to market, or realizing that the zeitgeist, everyone's compelled to write vampires again, and they were 15 years ago,
right? And
here we are again, and it's like, okay, well, some people can catch on to that and really have something ready, and it's okay to not, and it's okay to just do your own thing. And because I can't write things that aren't really important to me. All the books, all the stories I write about have to do with the environment in some kind of way, whether it's how we're pushing it, crushing it, how we're ruining some aspect of it, how we need to rediscover it, how we need to protect it, how we need to reconnect with it, but not in like an eco-fiction way, in like a way that I think in genres are kind of really different and readable in some kind of way, not in a literary way so much as like, what is this world that we're living in? How can we save it? And I feel like if I don't write a story that's like that, or that deals with something historical that we need to fix or change or rethink, then the book's going to be pretty crappy. Like the story's just going to stink, and it's just like pushing chickens around on a page instead of like a really interesting, compelling story. So I think that's really important to do no matter what, is to just really write the thing that makes you excited to get to the keys.
Exactly,
and try not to think about the other stuff so much.
Definitely, yeah. Write the book of your heart at whatever time that you're writing, right? Like, I think that's what makes, I mean, for me, writing has always been like very therapeutic, and it's writing things that are close to me, or, different things, like you have, what you write about is I'm sure is a very big passion of yours. And so I think when we write or force ourselves to write what we think will sell or whatnot, I mean, that changes it completely. So yeah, make sure you're writing what you're excited about, what's going to push you through to the end, because it is a hard journey regardless, right?
Exactly. It is so hard. But it's also like, oh my gosh, it's so exciting too.
Oh yeah.
You feel lucky, in these moments. You feel so fortunate to be able to tell a story and maybe have someone read it. I mean, it's like, maybe someone will read this. That's crazy. Maybe they'll be excited to read and be interested in saying, oh, there's somebody who looks like me in a book, or there's somebody who feels like me. And it's all just, I think we're all just trying to connect.
Oh, yeah.
We feel so disconnected, and it's a wonderful thing to feel like, oh, I can put a story in the world and maybe people won't feel alone.
Yeah.
And that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, like maybe I'll put a story into the world and someone is having a hard day or hard life, and escapes into this book and feels comfortable there. Like that is, what I always loved about books growing up. And so, that's the dream, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. Just to fall into that book.
Yeah.
And to feel different. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love
absolutely.
that. Well, thank you for sharing, those tips. And I think that was a good discussion on different things to remember as you trench through the queries. But my next question for you, I'd love to know what has been your favorite part and your least favorite part of your publishing journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think no matter what this year and this past couple years have brought us, I feel like Eric Smith has been just the kindest, most encouraging, and just fiercest advocate I could ever have. And I know he's this person to all of his authors too. So I feel like he's my favorite part of the publishing journey.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, he really is the person that he seems like online. And also, I think the 20 Wonders debut group for the YA and middle grade authors, they're so amazingly supportive and so kind. And I've been in other groups before, and I just haven't felt like I fit. And I feel like they have been so accepting of many different authors from many different walks of life and all over the world. And I feel like I'm so lucky to have found them. So if people are listening and they're debuting at some point, try to find a debut group to join, because they exist, and they might have a Facebook page, they might have some kind of website or something, and see if you can find those people, because your debut year is so weird and so complicated, and it's nice to share it with other people who are also kind of going through it. And so those are my favorite things so far. My least favorite part of publishing, no doubt, is the strange timeline that publishing lives in, which is it's not any other no other business or world lives in this publishing timeline. And I knew it was slow before because everyone tells you, oh, you could be unsubbed forever. You could be querying agents forever. But it's crazy because it's super slow. And then it's like Mach 10 all of a sudden. And you're like, you get like a quick email that says, can you have this by tomorrow? And you're like, oh my God, sure. And can I? And I don't know. And so it really happens overnight, and it also takes place over millennia at the same time. So that's my least favorite thing. And I don't know if I'll ever get used to that because I'm just kind of, I'm like a right now, let's do this. Let's just do it right now. And so when I wait, I get into trouble in my mind. I get into trouble in life in general. So I feel like, the timeline stinks. But that's just the reality of the book world.
It is the reality of the book world. And you are not alone in that being your least favorite part. That is a common answer to this question.
Why?
I know.
Why does it do that? Oh, yeah. I'm glad I'm not alone.
You're not alone. And I think it was, the author Liz Lawson, she posted something the other day that was this funny reel that was like, you so excited, I sold a book. And then, it's like 1 month later, her friend is asking like, oh, hey, is your book out yet? Can I read it? And she's like, no, not yet. And it's like 2 months later, 3 months later, 6 months later, 18 months later. And, but I mean, during all that time, you're working on your next thing, or you're doing revision, line edits, all that stuff,
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's really like this. Yeah, it's really a mental game, I think, once you are in the business of it. And you have so many things you can't announce, you can't talk about. And that's why the group is really important. So you have this secret group of people that you can actually talk to and like, hey, I got another book deal. I can't talk about it for 18 months.
Yeah.
I'm really excited or something. then at least you can celebrate in secrecy. But yeah, it's a crazy world.
It is a crazy world. But I mean, we put up with it because books, right? I mean, that is why we put up with it.
Totally.
Well, tell me a little bit about your writing process. So when you're drafting, are you more of a pantser, more of a planner, or do you fall somewhere in between?
Yeah. Oh, I'm writing right now. And so I'm realizing that I don't do either. I'm not like on this binary thing. I kind of, I write the most important scenes. So I think when I discover stories, I kind of, like everyone, I just freely write whatever, voices are on your head or whatever scenes that are magically appearing in your brain when you're taking a shower or driving or walking, you just do that.
Yeah.
But once the story, you're like, this is the story that I'm going to write, and this is the novel that it's going to be. I know all the major plot points. I know where it's going to end up. I usually know the ending before I know the beginning. And I know maybe like 5 scenes in the middle. And then I just write those. And then I realize I don't want to have any boring scenes. So I just try to keep kind of pushing myself to ask, okay, how do I get the character to that place? And so I try to make it painful. I try to make it really hard, and then hard on the characters. So I'm like, what would be the worst thing that could possibly happen at this point? Well, let's do that. And so I keep doing that until it knits together. So it's kind of it's more like gardening, where I know the landscape, I know this place, I know the setting, I know the world, and then I make things happen in it. And as it's happening, it just kind of organically comes together, and then I push it together. So I might build a trellis over here to make it link to that, and I might make this one lean to the left or put a support or something like that, add fertilizer, and then go back over and over and over, and then kind of revise and add in details. Usually my first drafts are pretty slender, and then I do a beautification draft where I take time with my sentences and things like that, and then it's done. But yeah, I think I'm a gardener. I think that's what, so I know the plants I want to plant. I know what it's going to look like in the end of spring or the middle of summer. But I'm like looking at the barren earth of winter and just like having to imagine what it's going to be like, and then writing the most beautiful parts that'll compel the story, or break the reader's heart. That's my goal usually, is like, what's going to make what's going to make Eric cry? And then I try to put it all together. But yeah, I don't really I know the parts. So I have some plot. I definitely have plot and ideas. But I don't let myself go so free, because it'll just be garbage that comes out of me if I'm just like, I'm just going to see what happens. So it's kind of a little bit of structure and a lot of hope and dreams. I think that's how I write.
I love it. I love that process. And I'm drafting something right now too. And I've definitely done that. I've written specific scenes, like, the ending, the climax, like, and the midpoint. And then I work my way in. And I went to a writing conference once, and I remember somebody saying, you got to ask yourself in each scene, what could be worse? And I do that too. I'm like, okay, how could I make this even more terrible? How could I make my characters even more upset, or this situation even worse? Because that definitely keeps it, the stakes high and keeps the story moving along for sure.
Yeah, there's nothing better to compel a story to continue forward than having that pain of some kind. And it doesn't have to be terrible. No. It can just, even in a comedy, if you're writing a romantic comedy, it's like, what is going to stop them from getting there? And you just want them to, all along the way, you just want to put problems so that they have to it makes their process a little bit harder. You already know the ending, so you just got to make it hard to get there.
Yes. Well, I love that. I asked this question just because, we all do it a little bit differently. There are people who hardcore outline, and I had an author who I talked to the other day who she writes her outline and she doesn't stray from it one bit. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. I wish I could do that, right? But I mean, for those people who are listening who maybe haven't quite figured out their process or are stuck and, need to try something new, it's always good to kind of hear what other people do.
Yeah, I feel like I kept thinking for the longest time, like, I have to be a plotter and I have to use these formulas, and I do. I use them. I use certain things. I'll go through and do that whole outline of the hero's journey. I'll go through and do an entire Save the Cat outline, and then I just throw them away because after that I just know what's the crux of the book. What are these key scenes? And then one thing that did help me a lot get out of a slump was the I'm going to forget it. Oh, what is that? Story Genius.
Oh, yeah.
And, I feel like when I get stuck, that tends to be a really useful process. Those character cards or those scene cards are really helpful in, like, what is the most important thing that needs to happen here? And so in the murky middles, that book has saved me so many times, and how to, like, make things harder, and, like, the third rail, and how to touch it and not be scared. The characters are tender, but you want to hurt them. And so how do you do that? But how do you do that in the way that their character needs to kind of understand their world? So that was really fun, actually, to understand the Story Genius cards. Those were fun.
Well, I love it. That's a good recommendation. If people are stuck, check out Story Genius.
Yeah.
Well, my next thing, Olivia, I'd love to have you share with me something your readers wouldn't necessarily know about you.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of actually started talking about that in the last section, but I'm a prolific gardener, like an actual gardener who grows plants. And I feel like,
awesome.
I come from a long line of gardeners, and for the past several years, I've been just kind of dedicating so much of my free time to growing food, and I enjoy it so much. And I'd rather spend most of my days with plants and bugs and invertebrates and animals than digging in the dirt and, like, planting the garden and thinking about the heirloom varieties of that plant. And, like, I just realized the other day I can actually grow loofah, and I'm going to grow sponges for our household next year. It's so interesting how many things that we take for granted, but that I can actually grow that plant that turns into a sponge, and then we can have sponges in our house. I just feel like it's so fun to see things grow. And I feel like, I live in Boulder. We have a short growing season at high altitude, so I have to amend the soil a lot. But when we do grow things, it's just like this thing that we've been waiting for the whole year, and it's so enjoyable and so beautiful. So I think gardening is my favorite thing, and I dream about getting goats and chickens and a miniature donkey and some Angora bunnies, and just like enjoying like an entire like backyard of animals. So that's our goal at some point, is just to kind of branch out and enjoy that a little bit more.
Oh, I love that. I can't even keep an air plant alive, so I applaud you for being a gardener, because I have the opposite of a green thumb. But I love, my dad is very much a great gardener, and I love going over and seeing and benefiting from the fruits of his labor.
That's awesome. That's good. It's so beautiful when they can share things with you too.
He has way too much too, so there's always excess, which he gives away, which is good. But yeah, I always have like fresh jam and all that stuff from stuff he's grown in his garden, and that's nice.
Oh, nice.
I
that's
wish
beautiful.
It is. I wish I could do it myself, but it's better for me to stay away from the plants, I think.
You know what? Just so you know, air plants, I've never kept one alive. I think because it's too arid here. So don't feel like you're an air plant killer, because I think they're like always dead. They just seem like so cute and like little sculptures, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're not really alive. I don't know. I
don't think so. I think too, I killed a succulent once, and I think it's because I didn't water it, or I watered it too much. I don't remember, but one day it was just gone. It was just like shriveled up. It disappeared. It probably ran away from me. Was like, get me away from this crazy lady. What do you do? I know. Well, Ani, how does your writing schedule look? So you're drafting something now. How much time do you like to spend writing, or do you set a word count goal for yourself? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's in a normal timeline, not like pandemic life. I feel like once I have the story, I spend a lot of time just daydreaming and thinking and not actually writing. And then when I actually have all the thinking done, the writing and composing doesn't take me very long, as long as I have 2 to 3 to 4 writing sessions per week. It usually takes me about 3 months to write a book, but I have to do a lot of work in my brain before I get to it. So but this past year was just a different existence. So
it was.
I spent more time teaching my 6-year-old kindergarten at home and trying not to freak out. I think I did that more than anything. It's just like, it's okay, don't worry, it'll be normal again. So I think this past year was hard. I tried desperately to continue to be my writer self that I was previously, in a world that had changed so drastically that I just burnt myself out. So I was writing at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and I wrote 100 words or 100 pages of a new book, but it was just so painful that by the end of the year I realized I had to stop doing that. I had to wait until I had more time, and I had to put more energy back into myself, because it's hard not to compare yourself to other people, but you look online, you're like, oh, I write like 4 books last year during the COVID year. Ugh. And I'm like, I'm like, guaranteed you had help. Like, there's no way you can have children and do that on your own, and also just be home with the kids. There's no way. No. And don't tell me that you haven't, because I will just cry. So I mean, I didn't have a sitter last year. A lot of the times I didn't have school. We didn't have family, and so I just realized, okay, well, we're going to just do our best. And I didn't write a lot. I thought a lot. And then now this year, hopefully school's open, and I'll crank it out. But I think like on a normal life, 3 to 4 work sessions a week. I don't care about word count. In fact, I get so annoyed when I see I think of myself like thinking about other people's word count. I think it's so private, and like my words, I might only have 1,000 words, but they're going to be 4,000 words in the revision. So I feel like I can't. Word count to me is it's like another way to isolate yourself as a writer is like, I didn't get these many words. That so and so, they post all their word count on Twitter every 5 minutes. I got this many words. And I'm like, I think that also hinders us so much. So I'm more about how many hours did I sit down? Did I try to write today? And then like the words will come. And, so, I mean, I can write 10,000 words, but they might all be terrible. So I'm not going to be like, oh, I wrote 10,000 words today. They're all just garbage. I think it's more about the time that I can give myself that's without the interruption of the rest of the world. Yeah. And that's hard. It's hard to find these days. Definitely.
Oh, it's so hard to find these days, especially with kids at home, and I'm currently repeating grades 1 and 3, so it's hard when you've got
goodness.
doing your kids' homework and doing school and all that. I definitely want to know those people who wrote 4 books this last year and ask them their secrets, because there's got to be something crazy going on. And I like your point too. I personally, my goal is to do 1,000 words a day. To meet the goal of when I want to be done drafting this book. But, I think it is so easy to compare to other people's word counts. There are authors who I follow, who post their word counts and they get 3,000 in a day, or, draft all day long and get 7,000 words. And it's like, whoa, why can't I do that? But it's like, oh, I have 3 children. I have to do all this other stuff. And I definitely give myself grace with, even if I get no words, or if I don't sit down at all, or, if I don't make it to the goal that I've set myself. But, it is so important, like, make sure you're not comparing yourself to other writers, because you don't know what's going on in their life, and just make sure if you found a rhythm that works for you. And, I like your how you said, I could write 1,000 words now, but in your beautification draft, they'll end up being 4,000 words. And the fact that that, and, you've settled on that, that's great. And for other authors, if that's your process too, make sure you're not comparing yourself to somebody who might be doing it way different than you, right? Because we all do it a little bit differently. So yeah, it can be easy to compare, especially with social media and all that stuff, but make sure you're trying to rein in the comparison game.
Totally. And most of my, I get so when you explain to a non-writer, a civilian, like
yes.
what you do, in their mind, they see a person at a typewriter or a keyboard just like slamming words on the page, right? But that's not writing to me. That's actually putting the words down. And writing to me, I'm mostly staring off, like most people, into the distance, thinking of something, or so I can give myself 3 to 4 writing sessions per week, but half the time I'm not actually typing.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's like word count to me is kind of like, well, it's like putting commas and periods, and it's making words and sentences. But the hard stuff for me is the ideas behind it and the problem solving, because when you finally know what you're going to write, that's fast.
Yeah.
We know that, right? It's fast. And those 1,000 words are amazing. And that's all you need. And you can move on to the next scene and stuff. But yeah, it's like, I'm not like clomping on the keys and just like for like 4 hours a day. I have like ergonomic issues from doing that. So yeah, it's really different. And a lot of people do that, and that's okay too. It's just, I think you're so right. Like, it's hard to know what other people are doing, how their composing process works, and how the writing process works, which are different things. And why when we see, I get 10,000 words, how to write this, there is no easy way, and there's only our way for ourselves. And we can fight really hard to find out how to do it like somebody else, but guaranteed at the end of the day, you have to do it your way, because that's the way your brain works. And once you know that, embrace it, your unique way.
Definitely. And as I like to say, not writing is still writing. So all that time that I sit at my keyboard and I write on my note cards that I use, like scene note cards, and I have note cards as I brainstorm and all that stuff, and they're all like pasted on the wall, which is super messy, but it's like visually so helpful for me. All of that process, not actually getting my 1,000 words or whatever, is part of the process. Me taking a walk and brainstorming ideas in my head, all the thinking I do as I cook dinner or do dishes. That's not writing, but it is still a part of the process. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I could sit down at my computer for actually only 20 minutes and get my words down, but then I'm still working on it the whole rest of the day in between everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is a good reminder. And I mean, I feel like we can kind of transition into the next question, which is, especially in this time that we're living in where, I'm in elementary school again, you're doing school with your child, or I don't know if your kid's back in in-person school or not, but, regardless, writing can be very emotionally draining and stressful if you're on deadline, with the way the publishing world works. But, we have to still function as a human being and fill our own buckets and make sure that, we're putting stuff back into ourselves, because writing is such a process of taking something out of you and putting it on the page. So what would your tips be based on, your experience with making sure you're getting done what you need to, but still, fulfilling yourself as just a person, and as in your family and your work and everything? What would your main tips be for other writers as they maybe go through something like that?
Yeah, I've been looking for that same advice lately. I've been scouring the interweb for what do I do? So empty. And then I forget, and this is terrible because this is the thing that has kind of carried me through the past year, was, and maybe you remember who said this, but there was a popular author who said that, writers have to juggle, and we just, as when we have families, and maybe it wasn't even writers, but it's just people in general, we are all juggling, and we just have to know which balls are rubber and which balls are glass. Ooh. So we can drop, we catch the glass ones, but and I'm totally misquoting this, and I feel terrible that I haven't remembered exactly who said that, but it really changed the way I thought about things, because this idea that we can have it all, we can do it all, and we can have a career, and I can be a writer, and I can be a mom, and I can be a gardener, and I can be a nice wife, and a good cook, and it's just a lie. There's no way that we can do it all, but the things that we do and that we choose to do, I think we have to be okay with and happy with and proud of. And maybe I'm really bad at cleaning the house, and maybe I'm really bad at X, Y, and Z, but I've done certain things that I think are important to kind of continue and be human. I think the hardest thing about the past year for me has been trying to understand that I'm not the same person. The whole year just gave me such terrible anxiety that I kind of receded into myself with panic attacks and just kind of losing myself a little bit. And I think so many people did that same thing, where they were just kind of worried about the world in general. And I think instead of having the same expectations for myself when I sit at the keys, because usually writing isn't so hard. I'd sit at the keyboard and be like, oh, this is the scene I'm going to write. Here I go, put the headphones on, play my soundtrack, and then go. I would do that, and nothing would happen. Or I'd just sit there and stare, or I would end up I'd have to put on some kind of distraction tools, or just find a way for myself to just sit down, and I couldn't do it. And so I think what I learned was to stop. Don't do that, because the more you do that, the more you hurt yourself staring and fighting yourself to sit there and produce words that aren't coming, the more you'll drain yourself. And so what I had to do was stop. So I gave myself a week off, of not even thinking about anything. And then guess what? At the end of that week, I solved the biggest problems I've been trying to solve for 6 months. Yeah. And I'm oh, so if you find yourself and this is my advice, if you find yourself banging your heads against the keys and it's hurting, stop, because it'll start feeling better. And give yourself a break, because that's what your body needs. And you're more than just a writer. You're a human being who needs to be cared for, and you need to care for yourself. And so whatever that is. And usually you find that when you just step away. Yes. So give yourself a break, even if it's a few days. Take weekends off, unless weekends are the only days you can write. Take some days away from writing, and treat yourself nicely. Because I feel we all treat ourselves, we're just so hard on ourselves.
For sure.
So that's what I learned this year. Hopefully I don't forget it quickly. If school's open again, hopefully I'm no, I can do this. Let's just keep banging my head against the keyboard and see what comes out. No, but I want to care for myself better.
Yeah.
And be a good example for my child too, is like, don't suffer.
No.
Like, we should be happy and let's do this well. And maybe you need a day off, you know?
Because, I mean, there are obviously always going to be hard parts on the author journey. And sometimes, you have to write even if you don't want to when you're on a deadline or whatnot. But when you have the ability to give yourself a break, definitely do it. Because, we're not machines. We're not, we don't have like an endless supply of energy like our small children who seem to have found the fountain of energy. But, definitely give yourself a break and know that it's okay to not write. I mean, for parts of this year, the majority of this year, I mean, I had a baby in February, so I didn't write for like 6 months out of the year. And I'm glad I gave myself that grace and didn't put it on myself like, no, I should still be writing, because, I mean, I was a mess and it was crazy to like be pandemic and have a newborn and all that jazz. So I'm glad I gave myself the ability to not write. Because once I did start writing, later on in the year, it was a lot better.
Oh my gosh, you're like amazing. I can't believe. Yes, congratulations, on your baby.
Thank you.
That's amazing and wonderful. And oh my gosh, I think the same thing. Like, when you have a baby, for some reason, I thought, I can keep writing,
right.
Which is so silly. Like, don't do that. Just keep your like go to sleep when you can. Like, take care of yourself. I think there's this thing about people where we're like, no, we got this. It's like so valued to just not be affected by these major important things, and to like, I got this. And I think that's totally missing the point about being human. Is like, no, we need to not get this. We need help, and we need to like take care of ourselves. And I hope we learn, like, as a world, to like, now this past year, maybe that's what we've learned, is like how to just find the small things and not rush, and take care of yourself and your baby and your life. And writing will come. It'll be there. The keys will still be there. Yeah.
It'll still be there. And I think that is, I think there is such a pressure to be unaffected by children or, these crazy things going on in the world. But if you are affected by it and it's hard on your heart or your brain or your energy level, you are not alone. Like, we are all, I think, facing that. And maybe some people are hiding it better than others. But I'm glad I took a break. And, then I had great success with writing the end of the year, and, I'm almost done drafting something new, which I haven't drafted something new since 2017. I worked on the same book for 3 years, writing and editing and revising again and again. So, it all comes. It'll be okay, you guys.
Totally. It's going to be okay.
It's going to be
we just
okay.
We just got to keep
Yes.
Keep going and taking care of yourself. That's awesome.
Well, I have just one last question for you. It is probably the hardest question, so I do apologize. I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. This is not your favorite book of all time. Just something you've read recently that, like, you can't stop talking to people about.
Oh, yeah. And it has to be one. And so that's really hard because I read like 15 books at a time. So I'm like, oh.
You can give me more than one if you need
to. Well, I have to say, I'm really lucky to have so many arcs from the 20 Wonders.
Oh, yeah.
And all these great books that are coming out next year. The one that I keep thinking about a lot is Megan Freeman's middle grade book Alone.
Oh,
and
so
it just
good.
Like blew me away, and she's just such a poetic author, and it's so beautiful, and the feeling of nostalgia, that book feels like what a middle grade felt like when I was of that age, and I felt like so transported into that landscape. And then I live in Colorado and she lives in Colorado, so I feel like it was so familiar and beautiful. But I really recommend everyone buying that when it comes out or pre-ordering it. And it comes out, goodness, a week before my book. It's in January, so get your orders in for that middle grade book Alone. Have you read that?
I have read it. I think it comes out on the 12th.
Yeah.
Does it come out on the 12th? Yeah, I did read it, and it's the first, I had never read a novel in verse before, and so I didn't really, know what to expect, but oh my gosh, I devoured that book. I read it so fast, which always, as an author, I'm like, wow, this probably took her so long to write, and here I am reading it in a day. Like, that's so unfair, but it was so good. I loved it. I still think about it, because it was very atmospheric, and yeah, just, really, really well done.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yes, me too. I loved it.
Yeah.
I still think about it. That's when you know
yes.
a book has changed you. You feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You feel it, and then you still feel it like a month later, and you're like, wow, that was really good.
It was really good. I did the same thing too. I think it took her, I know it took her several years to write, and I just drank it in 2 days, and I was like, sorry, I did it so fast. I read it so fast. I really wanted to stretch that out, but it was just so enjoyable.
Yeah. I interviewed her for the podcast, and I think she told me that she wrote it all, in prose, like a novel first, and then rewrote it again in verse. And I'm like, yeah, so she basically wrote it twice, and I read it in a day. But that's okay. It just means she did a really good job.
Really good job. It was excellent.
Really good job.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing your favorite book with me. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me and letting me and my listeners get to know you a little bit better and telling us all about Rise of the Red Hand.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I'm excited.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Authors and Agents. And please make sure to rate and review this podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter. My handle is @RoseQuinny, QUINNY. And make sure to go ahead out there and pre-order Rise of the Red Hand.